let you guys know I am sick. I am recovering from a sickness. I have a low-grade fever, but I think I have enough endurance to get through this. My energy might just be a little bit lower than normal, so apologies for that. And I might not quite have the same endurance. So we'll see how long we can go for. I'm surely going to get through all of the builds because that's what I'm doing the stream for. Certainly couldn't let you guys down. All right, guys, you ready to go? Well, without further ado, I present to you Ravi Lava's first ever Theorycraft design contest. Woo! And there is much rejoicing. Yeah, like I said, it was tough going through all these submissions and making cuts. There were 2 heartbreaker cuts in particular I will get into a little bit later. And we're going to start by showcasing the finalists and giving you guys a chance to start the voting process. But then we're going to showcase all the other builds who didn't quite make the finals because there was quite a lot of them. Before that, though, let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, to the victor, what are the stakes for this competition? First off, you're going to get a Robbie-style civilization doc that we will make together. You'll be contributing things like the campaign text and maybe some of the other like flavor stuff, and I can write out all of the the hard numbers and stuff like that to whatever degree of detail you want. It'll be a collaborative process, but you will also get a custom-made ensign as well as unit icons and similar. I'll be making like a bonus box and a tech tree like I do for all of my videos as well. You're going to get a short showcase vid. Obviously, we won't focus as much on the history because either it's a civ that's already in the game or it's a civilization that I've already done. But I will certainly be going into depth about some of the unique qualities of your build, reviewing it like I do mine, focusing on playstyle, stuff like that. And if you'd like, you can contribute to writing that script alongside me. And lastly, art. Yes, indeed. It's time to say hello to our good friend Merlin Kater. He is a viewer of the channel, a very good dude, and a very talented artist. Here are some of his pieces on his Instagram. I don't know about you guys, but to me, this looks very reminiscent of the style of classic AoE2 campaign art, like in the slideshow presentations. And so because of that, you will have access to a commission from him that you get to choose what it depicts, ideally for one of your campaigns that you choose for your build. Also, I'd highly recommend you guys go and follow Merlin on Instagram. Also, just a very, very decent guy, and really wanted to be a part of this process from our discussions. And so it seems like a great way of introducing him to all of you guys. Are you ready? All right, the first of our 5 finalists. Oop, did I say 5? I meant 3. Let's go. Is going to be Tomasz Stanek with his build for the Bohemians. Yes, indeed. Let's go and take a look at his civilization document. So, I'm going to give a quick overview of what he has here. And again, I'd encourage you guys to go and follow along through my linked Google Drive at the top of the chat. So, Tomasz starts his build by discussing why the current Bohemian build does not work very well from a historical perspective. He has quite a lot of knowledge about the era, and to like vaguely summarize what's going on, his criticisms are largely that it's very simplistic and tends to focus over much on the whole Hussite thing rather than Bohemian history writ large. He specifically has a lot of criticism about the Hussite wagon, how it's very iconic and sure, very cool, but it's really poorly implemented in game and kind of a disaster for balance, and how the Hofnitze in its current state is really tricky to balance. Now, here's what he has reworked things to. Oh, and also he says that he hates wagon bird tactics, which is fair play, man. So, his rework of the Bohemians, a gunpowder and monk civilization. First bonus, villagers can drop off resources at houses. 2, villagers in line of sight of gourds work 50% faster starting in Castle Age. My gourd unit, wouldn't you know it? Third bonus, monks benefit from infantry armor upgrades. 4th bonus, villagers and infantry benefit from sanctity and fervor, so an expansion of the current one. 5, chemistry and hand cannoneer available in Castle Age, same as we currently have. Unique units. So I won't be able to pronounce this first one. Tarasovi Strelec. I think. I know that that R is awful, and it's like R and J together. R, I think. Strelech. Can't quite get it. And it's a unique hand cannoneer. Then he also still has the Hofnitzer. His unique text, town privileges make it such that town centers can train villagers for 50 gold. Food-bought villagers and gold-bought villagers may be trained at the same time. Very creative. And then Jus regale monatorum. Villagers can drop off gold and stone at gourds and castles. They drop off 10% more at gourds and 25% more at castles. And team bonus is, I believe, identical. Markets work 80% faster. So his justification for these bonuses is honestly fantastic. If I went into all the detail I'd like to go into, it would be quite, like, we'd be here for a little bit of time. So I'd like you guys to go and take a look before you make your decision on voting. In summary, he is trying to give a more comprehensive look at Bohemian history, besides just the kind of boilerplate Hussite stuff that we see in game right now. And as mentioned, he incorporates stuff like my gourd building, which of course, no bias there. I certainly didn't influence my decision to put him in the top finals. But I found that not only were his justifications extremely compelling, but actually, before I go into more detail, let's take a look at his unique unit, because the way that he's handled his unique units is very interesting as well. So, Tarasovi Strelech. Tomasz, I see you in chat. Tell me if I'm butchering this. It is much like a hand cannoneer. However, it costs wood instead of food. It has a good amount of melee armor and a bonus versus cavalry, a fairly substantial one, as well as infantry. But it has much lower attack. So, it's a different type of gunpowder unit that is trying to reference the famous Bohemian-like ability to rebuff cavalry charges with gunpowder that we all know and love, but done in a different way. I think it's fairly clean, and a gunpowder unit that's good against cavalry is something the game doesn't have. I like their big shield, too. I think that's quite cool. Secondly, his take on the Hofnitzer is very unique. He actually has it replacing the Mangonel line. So it's available in Castle Age, and it actually has stats more similar to a Mangonel than to a bombard cannon. In fact, they're much more similar. So it really is serving a completely different role in your army than the current one, and one that is much more fitting to history, because Hofnitzer were field cannons, not siege cannons. Excuse me. If you're just joining us, I am sick. Apologies for grossness. He has a couple of general tech tree changes, but his general theme, let's let him say it in his own words here. My goal with this rework was to keep the Bohemian army structure as unique as it currently is while giving them more versatility. Bohemian military tactics, and especially Hussite tactics, were highly adaptive, so it felt right to give them more options in army structure while making their unorthodox transitions easier for the player. It's not just Bohemian military tactics that were highly adaptive, but also the society as a whole, which underwent many rapid changes in the Middle Ages, from a tribal society to a feudal one, from a society of empowered cities to the Hussite revolts. I tried to capture this feeling, mostly with new eco bonuses and texts, and tried to make each age feel unique in playstyle with a whole new dynamic. It was also a part of my attempt to de-Hussitanization of the civilization, as there's far more to Bohemian history than just the 15th century. Amen. He also goes into some detail about some scrapped concepts. He has suggestions for scenarios and campaigns. In fact, he has incredibly thorough details of how he'd want to see a campaign handled, and not just one campaign, several campaigns. I think that they look brilliant, and it's clear that he knows his stuff, which, if you know Tomasz, you know he does. So thank you very much for your submission, Tomasz. Excellent job, and you certainly deserve your position in the finals. All right, let's take a quick look at chat before moving on. Actually, before we take a look at chat, I have a couple of other thoughts that I want to summarize on Tomasz's build. So in my opinion, this had the best raw historicity of all submissions. Not surprising, considering Tomasz is quite proficient with this area of history. And I think that level of attention to detail and historical... what word am I looking for? Historical faithfulness is really admirable. I think he has a great analysis of the Civ's current issues, especially with how focused on Hussite stuff it is. But even from a mechanical standpoint, I think he has a good grasp of what's wrong with it right now, too. And I love all of his bonuses. I especially like the house drop-off one. I think it's very cleanly done, and he justifies quite well why it's not just strictly better than the Japanese camp discount bonus. Because after all, you will still have to build your camps eventually to get the technologies that are inside of them. You're just saving in the very, very early game using houses to replace your camps during Dark Age, for example. I also love, of course, how he incorporates my gourds. And I would say that this build was not, like, daring, but it was extremely clean, you know what I mean? Like, I obviously like my daring builds, but there's a big place in my heart for ones that, like, it's not boring. By far and away not boring. But I think that it approaches things in a very moderate way and ends up with what looks like a build that belongs in the game right now, you know? And lastly, I think his campaign recommendations are fantastic. So that's my summary of Tamash's build. I hope that you guys enjoyed this first finalist. Let's move on to the next finalist. On to finalist number 2. Rowan Drake with her build for the English. Da, 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 da. Nicely done, Rowan. Let's move on and take a look at your build. So, Rowan gave me a very thorough document talking about her own upbringing in England, specifically in the Welsh Marches, and how she does not necessarily think that the English have been done justice in the game currently as Britons. It's a very narrow slice of history, while her build more focuses on the post-1066 England as it would become to be known. So we're talking everything from William of Normandy up to effectively Elizabethan times. Remember, the AoE2 relevant time frame goes right up until 1600 AD. The Noryang Point scenario is at 1598. And that means that Shakespeare technically falls within the AoE2 relevant time frame. And an English build that she's trying to represent here is trying to do a better job of encompassing later Britain rather than just focusing on early Britain, as well as being a more precise slice of the history, whereas the current Britons, they're kind of a lot of different civilizations all bundled into one, including the Welsh, for example. So, as with many other great builds, she submitted a lot of cool aesthetic details. I really liked her summary of the coat of arms and the different wonders. I think Tower of London, you gotta go with the Tower of London, man. Some campaigns as well. I liked quite a lot of these campaign ideas, especially I thought that her suggestion of a Warwick campaign where you're kind of king-making during the War of the Roses, that was fantastic. Brief pause, excuse me. And of course, I think Elizabeth I is a great option, but of course would be very tail end of AoE2 relevant time frame. So in summary, Rowan, thus far, just on the aesthetics front, is covering pretty much all the ground that I do in normal videos, but then she gets into something a lot more exciting. The Longbowman becomes a regional unit for the English and a hypothetical Welsh civ, replacing the crossbow line from Castle Age onwards, much in the same way that winged hussars replace normal hussars. Because of this, the longbow and archer range will be less of a focus in this build. This version of the Longbowman would have slightly less range than the Longbowman does right now when maxed out, but still will have distinctly more than average. The civilization bonuses, however, get pretty interesting. Bonus the first. A free fishing ship with each dock built. Very useful. Britain is known for its fishing economy, and as such, having no fishing-related bonuses in the original build feels very, very weird. 2, foot archers have +1/+2 attack versus cavalry in Castle and Imperial Age. Very makesensical. We all know about Agincourt, and more broadly, the longbow was very, very effective versus horses. 3, shepherds generate gold in addition to food. Sensible. Britain obviously has a very prominent wool economy. 4, castles are 10% cheaper for each previous castle built, up to a maximum of 40%. Very interesting. Her justification for this was great, though, because certain parts of England are some of the most castled areas in the world, so having a castle discount does seem to make a lot of sense. And 5, warships and trade ships have bonus speed, armor, and attack in Imperial Age, representing England's transition into a thalassocracy, which would obviously, it would really step into those shoes outside of the AoE2 relevant time frame, but it was starting to do so towards the tail end. So, not only does Rowan have a lot of fantastic justification for all this, which I will let you guys go into more detail and read about, but I want to get down to the unique unit that she submitted, as well as the longbowman. So first of all, her version of the English have a second replacement unique unit, namely the billman. It is a replacement of the halberdier, and it has reduced bonus damage versus cavalry, elephants, camels. But in exchange, it reduces armor and pierce armor by 1 for 3 seconds after attacking, like an oboe, but not as good because it is not a permanent reduction. So this makes it a more versatile unit while being slightly less good at halberdier things. The bill is arguably the most iconic of all British weapons after the longbow, so seeing it represented like this feels very, very good to me. And then secondly, the castle unique unit is called the Knight Errant, and it is a dismounted knight. A bit cheaper than a normal one, speed of a champion, but very, very beefy. They don't take bonus damage from halberdiers because they're not cavalry, but they do from infantry. And she's trying to allude to the wandering knights that were like a part of chivalric romance, but also you would see like knightly. You'd see kind of themes of knightly honor and virtue on display in many different elements of English society, as well as Western Europe more broadly. Makes me feel like a unit like this, like a dismounted knight, should be a more broad-ranging unit. And I would personally say this is the weakest part of the build. That being said, I want to end off strong with the unique techs. These are my favorite part of this build, and I'll get into a little bit later why. First of all, Castle Age. Royal Forestry. Trees last 25% longer. Mwah. Perfect. Great theming. Forestry and forest conservation was a huge part of medieval England. Even I knew that. And it synergizes incredibly well with both the archer focus and the ship focus. Because obviously you have finite wood on most water maps. And so, beautiful. I love this tech. Imperial Age Magna Carta. So famous. Of course this should be part of the build. All buildings within 8 tiles of at least one of your castles work 10% faster, including resource drop-off rates. It works like an Age of Mythology pharaoh. Also, extremely fitting. It makes sense that the Magna Carta, which was obviously one of the most impactful documents ever signed in the history of the world, would help the work rate and production of your country. It's hypothesized that the Magna Carta was part of the reason that England became an industrial power so early, because it kind of had this precedent of, I'm not going to say true empowerment, but like it was slightly more decentralized than other European monarchies. But that's definitely, don't take that one as gospel truth. And so, with an overview of the civilization done, I'll just pardon me, team bonus, duh. It's the current one of archery ranges working 20% faster. Might have to nerf this one, Rowan, considering the recent nerfs to the Britons, but perfectly makes sense, Cole. I actually thought this was one of the best bonuses on the current Britons, and I think it makes a lot of sense here. The levying of archer units was extremely common in medieval England. And besides that, some tech tree changes. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about these. But to end off what is already an excellent build, not only are all of these tech tree changes extremely well thought out and detailed, but Rowan has an entire summary of the game plan for the civilization, much like I normally do in my videos, but way more thorough, like drastically more thorough, which I absolutely love. Focusing obviously on how strong they are on water, for example, and similar. But she also has a loose threads section. Oh, beautiful. I love it. And scrapped ideas too. Just a mirror of the way that I normally conduct civilization designs. It makes me very, very happy. So wow, that was a lot to go over. You guys see how much like good stuff people are submitting to me? It's just unfair. Let's go into some of my specifics for why I liked this build. Beginning with, it's a really good depiction of a pretty broad range in history. Like 1066 to like 1592 or whatever it was. It's a lot of time to cover. And I think that Rowan's bonuses do a really great job of showing England evolving over time. Going from like a relatively mixed power, like not even a mixed power. What am I trying to say here? England was in a state of relative turbulence for a large part of its early history, and obviously after William kind of consolidated it, it remained fairly turbulent for a while, only kind of emerging as a power over the next couple centuries, and I think her build does a brilliant job of showing that. It has excellent attention to detail and justification with a really good playstyle assessment. Like I said, that playstyle assessment was several times better than mine. So really good pointos for that one. I liked the bonuses. They weren't too weird, they weren't too wacky, but I thought that archers and Doc overall as like a focus for the Britons made perfect friggin' sense. They really deserve to be a naval civilization, and I really like how she addressed it without taking away from their archer side too much. I also think that her unique technologies were my favorite overall pair that was submitted to me across all builds. I loved them, I loved their history, I loved how they synergize, and I thought that they were well balanced. Then there was also that little section incorporating my unit theory crafts. I didn't mention that when I was going through the build, but she actually said, you know, if Robbie's footmen were to exist, for example, how would they fit in my English build? And like, come on, that's how can I not like love that? You know what I mean? Okay, are you guys ready for finalist number 3? Number 3, let's do it. Riza Garrow with his build for the Jurchens. Da, 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 da. Nicely done. I don't know if it's Rise or Riza. I just keep saying Riza because it feels more right to me. Now, let's take a look at his build of the Jurchens. Now, interestingly enough, he actually sent me this build quite a while ago, bundled with another build, which was not submitted to this competition, because he just wanted me to take a look at it. And I thought it was so fantastic that when I had the idea for this contest, I reached out to him and I said, do you want to submit this thing? Because it was brilliantly done. Look at this table of contents. Mwah! Just a thing of beauty here. Pardon me. So as you guys marvel at the table of contents, let's move on to this slick-ass looking civilization card. Like, obviously, I use the older style of civilization card for my builds, but wow, this looks really authentic. And he already has all the information on the civ right here for us to enjoy. Let's go through his design. The Jurchens, a cavalry and archer civilization. Bonus the first. Mills cost only 25 wood and have +3 line of sight. Very strong. 2, the first mill constructed spawns 2 reindeer next to it. Wow, I love that. I love that design so much. 3, stable technologies research 80% faster. Very sensible. 4, arson also affects all mounted units. Obviously, I did something similar on a recent one. I promise I didn't just rip him off, but it is a very good idea. Unique unit is the Iron Pagoda. We'll get into that a little bit later. And their unique technologies in Castle Age, Guaisama, similar to what I did in my build, but in this case, it makes Step Lancers and Iron Pagodas attack 50% faster. Wow. And Imperial Age, Manchu Archery. Archers and Cavalry Archer lines gain +2 attack. Their team bonus is that Archer line upgrades are 20% cheaper. Pretty low impact, that one. Now, he has this beautiful map depicting where the Jurchens are operating in conjunction to a bunch of other civilizations. And he starts by going over a campaign idea and adding another common unit to the game. Now this would be available to the Chinese and Jurchens as a pre-upgrade to the hand cannoneer. It is the Fire Lancer. Yeah, look at these beautiful depictions. Look at how thorough it is. Look at that slick-ass unit icon. Wow! Like, it took me a while looking at it to realize how he'd done it. You know what I mean? Just really, really nicely done. And I think that not only does he go over the stats of it in great detail, how it works, and again, available both to Jurchens, this Jurchens build and the Chinese, but he has tons of different pictures and illustrations of what was going on. I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, adding into further detail, he's adding new frickin' objects to the game. Reindeer as a new hunt type, moose as a new aggressive hunt, Korean fucking pines as a new tree type. What the hell? That just went above and beyond what any other build did. Korean pines, come now. That's unbelievable amount of detail. A beautiful civilization icon. Hopefully you guys can see it and my big stupid face isn't blocking it. Has flavor text for the civilization, goes into detail on the history behind all of the civilization bonuses. Just mwah, beautiful stuff. Again, I really loved his reindeer herding bonus because it turns out reindeer herding was pretty common, and he has this right here. Jurchen itself means reindeer people. And so a reindeer herding bonus makes me feel dumb for not including that in my own build, you know what I mean? And that's a good sign for a build to me. So his Iron Pagoda Unlike mine, which is an upgraded Step Lancer, this is like a dual-wielding cavalry maniac who deals trample damage, but is otherwise a fairly standard heavy cavalry unit. It does have a buttload of armor, though. Take a look if you want to see more info on their stats. And I believe this build doesn't have the Nightline. Correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I believe it doesn't. He gives more detail on his unique technologies, focusing, you know, on like a bit of the history and the effects and how it kind of translates together. And once again, just got to comment on how clean his presentation is. Incredibly slick. I love the background. I love all the pictures. Yep, focusing on lacking units, lacking techs. Oh no, they do have the Nightline. They're missing Paladin though. Okay, so they have a couple of different heavy cavalry options, which makes sense because you're not going to be making Iron Pagodas immediately for a Night Rush or anything. Goes into detail about history, language, architecture, AI player names, which I didn't do in mine, of course. Hey, Linji Temple, that's what I picked as well. Woo-hoo. And then he also rounds it out with some design considerations and even credits me as an inspiration. What a guy. So nice. I love it. So, Rizagaro, fantastic job with this submission, my friend. Let's go over some of my favorite things about it. 1. The graphics and the presentation. Those unit icons were sick. Like, just the amount of eye candy in this presentation was insurmountable. Just unbelievable stuff. It also was, like, kind of similar to my build, while still being very distinct. Like, it focused on different elements of their history in a very, very interesting way, which I thought was just aces. I also loved how thorough it was. Like I said, you add frickin' Korean pines to the game. Bah, what the hell? That's unbelievable. Like, that's the sort of detail that I aspire to achieve in my builds. Now, the regional Fire Lancer is also a high point for me. I think that's one of my favorite additions that he made. I'd love to see something like that. And in fact, I did ask him permission to kind of steal this idea in future. So you're probably going to be seeing this from me on this channel in the not too distant future. I thought the Iron Pagoda was pretty cool, pretty well done. Oop, actually, don't go yet just yet. I would say overall, my biggest issue with this build, if I had to choose an issue, like the presentation, the history, everything was so beautifully done. My biggest issue is that I felt like some of the technologies and the bonuses were a little tepid. Like especially the Imperial Age one felt a little meh to me. And I thought the team bonus was a little on the weak side. That being said, that's counterbalanced by other elements of the build, like for example, the reindeer spawning being just so sick. And so this build was absolutely dripping with style, and I think it 100% deserves a secure spot in the finals. Remember when I said we're only going to have 3 finalists? I couldn't do it, guys. I could not make the cuts necessary to only have 3 finalists, so we're having 5. Let's move on to finalist number 4. Zaster994 with his build of the Kartvelians. Ooh, what are the Kartvelians, you may ask? Well, it is a actual ethnic demonym for the Georgians, rather than using the term Georgian, which is mostly used by the people who were conquering and subjugating Georgia. This would be a term. This is a term that they've used for themselves, and so already a good amount of style with that pick, Zasor. Nicely done, man. Let's take a look at his build. If you guys are following along, or if you guys want to follow along, make sure that you take a look at the pinned comment. It has the Google Drive link that has all of the builds. And so make sure that you give each one a thorough read before you vote if you deem it necessary. So let's go through Zastor's build for the Georgians, or as he more rightly calls them, the Kartvelians. He gives some context on why he's making the decisions he makes, but then goes into his civilization bonuses. And I should say, he named his civ bonuses, which I've realized I am a sucker for. I really, really enjoy it when people do that. I didn't think it was like a thing I would like this much going in. First of all, winemaking tradition. Forge bushes give plus 40% food, and 10% of their food becomes gold. Very, very nice. It is a nice, clean take on a similar bonus that he actually helped me design for my own Georgians build, but has the extra gold element added to it. Next, Chidalba, I think Chidalba Wrestling. All melee units, including villagers, get plus 1 attack. Very versatile. Mountain Warfare, elevation damage reduction increases from 25 to 35%, and plus 1 range when attacking downhill. Ooh, very, very cool. This will help compensate for them not having Bracer, which I think it's necessary. Like, I didn't have Bracer in my Jordan's build. I've seen a bunch of Jordan's builds at this point. All of them lack Bracer. And this seems like a clean way of keeping them with a defensive identity that he's trying to go for without having Bracer, which is normally a really important defensive bonus. Lastly, Cuman Immigrants, Heavy Cavalry Archer, free. Very makes sense goal. Team bonus, Monks regenerate Faith 20% faster. As he says, it wouldn't be a Jordan Civ concept without a Monk bonus. And unique technologies, Castle Age, Monaspa Cavalry. It gives the Step Lancer line +2/+1 armor, 20 more HP, and attacks as fast as a knight. Wow, that is a very powerful bonus, and it's meant to make them a true alternative to the knight line, like a cheaper knight with less HP and a ranged attack, as he puts it. He was thinking about having this be a unique upgrade to the Step Lancer line, but wasn't really sure how to manage it. And I feel like every single Georgian build besides mine has played with the idea of Monashpa Lancers. It makes me feel like I probably should have done so. He gives, again, his build has a lot of attention to detail in terms of balance. And I think that it is very, very, like, it's a different direction that a lot of other people chose to take, because Zastar, when he gives feedback on my builds as well, it is very much oriented towards actual competitive balance. Oh, pardon, I just glanced at chat. The document is locked, Philip says. Is anyone else having that problem? If so, let me know, and I can try to reshare it, because I want to make sure you guys have access to the doc in full. So let me know in chat if it is locked for you. Imperial Age technology, Legacy of the Builder. Buildings built and repaired 40% faster. Buildings cost 20% less to repair and 20% less wood to build. Very expensive technology too. Obviously, this is him going for a more defensive-oriented bonus, and it's working with their expansion in the later Middle Ages. It's going to help with forwarding, and it kicks in too late to be a real economy bonus. I think it is a very interesting way of approaching it. I think that the wood cost might be a little too high for my personal taste. Oh, pardon me, Hans. Yeah, I'm actually very sick today, so I hope that doesn't detract too much for you guys. Okay, and he mentioned not wanting to reduce the stone cost of buildings per detonates. So, unique unit, Tazraeli, similar to what I have, but instead of mine being a cavalryman, his is a generalist infantryman. It is actually healed twice as fast inside buildings and by monks. I also had like a healing-oriented bonus on my build, which I find interesting. It has bonus damage versus cavalry and camels, and it is quite resistant to conversion. He has comprehensive stats for both it and the elite upgrade, as well as some details on the actual history behind it. But then he has a second unique unit. This is a barracks unit called the Kevsur. This is a trash unit. It is quite weak and has quite low attack, but it does a lot of bonus damage against buildings and is fairly fast to build. It also is tankier and does more damage while within 3 tiles of a forest or cliff. There we go. That's a little bit of spice in here. Now, I had no idea about the history about this, but here's his justification. At first, I didn't intend on having this build have 2 unique units, but everywhere I went, I read about the fierce guerrilla warriors of the Kevsureti region, but that didn't really fit what I had in mind for the castle unique unit. I thought that was a very interesting direction to go with the civilization, and makes them not just a dirtily nonsense build that does nothing besides sit back and wait for people to come to them in Imperial Age. It gives them this really good raiding unit that's trash as well, which I find extremely interesting. So, and they benefit from supplies and gambesons too. Nice. Always like that. Much weaker against all other units, so they're not very good in trash wars, which makes a lot of sense as well. Has some tech tree options, and he focuses on a couple of things like, for example, them missing guilds because they were not a huge trading crossroads. He also, and this is another thing I realized I'm a sucker for, gives them a new architecture set, namely a Caucasian architecture set with a proper monastery, for example, being an important focus. He specifies that it could be shared with a couple of other builds, with exception of things like monastery, and excuse me. Let's see, other focuses. Yep, some language notes, a good game plan summary, and ends it off with an all-around overview of the civilization. You'll notice that the presentation on this one isn't nearly as flashy as a lot of the other builds, but I think what it lacks in style, it makes up for it in substance. Here's some of my favorite parts about this particular build. I think that this is the best competitively balanced of all the submissions I received. I don't think this build would be broken, nor do I think it would be trash. I think it would actually be quite decent on a number of different game modes. And I think that it's very easy to make the Georgians like this late game defensive elite do-nothing civilization, kind of like the Saracens used to be. And so seeing them taken in this different, more dynamic direction was really interesting for me. It's a very elegant design that has rather understated bonuses that I think have a lot more impact than they might look to be on the surface, and never goes like too overboard. You know, even the Kevsur unique unit I think is strong and interesting without being anywhere near too weird or too broken by any means. I love the bonus range downhill thing. Is it just me, or might that be a fitting mechanic for everyone? Maybe. We'll talk about that sometime in the future, I'm sure. And I love the native demonym. That's a very good touch. Kartvelian rather than Georgian. Makes me want to change my build to add that in. And like I said, yeah, the Kevsur was really intriguing. I'd say that it getting better near trees and cliffs was probably the weirdest thing that Zastar did with this build. And for being the weirdest thing he did, it's still like not too weird. I could totally see a bonus like that being brought to play in game in the not terribly distant future. Like, because we see the game right now taking more risks than it's ever done before, and this seems like kind of a natural next step to take it in. And lastly, new architecture. I've realized that I really love new architecture sets, and I think that he did a great job of implementing his and giving some general overviews for it. And so overall, I think that Zastar did a fantastic job. I mean, he's always a great designer. He gives fantastic suggestions to my own builds, and seeing him take his own crack at something, I found not only very fun and satisfying, but also he really showed his attention to detail and his balance-oriented mind with how he approached this one. Without further ado, let us take a look at David GG with his build for the Persians. A rework proposal. So, like many other people, he leads off with history, in this case focusing on the fact that Persia had an incredibly broad-reaching time frame, and he's going to try to cover as much of it as possible. He starts with some flavor, including a new architecture style. Yeah! He says, or specifically with a unique town center for each age, which I think is very cool, and I love all of these beautiful architecture examples that he has for us to work off of. So, already off to a strong start. I've learned more and more that I am an absolute sucker for architecture. He gives some more details like language, wonder, campaigns, and similar. Focuses on a couple of their major themes, including their great farming economy, good trade, cheap conscripts in wartime, heavily armored cavalry. On to a summary of his build. The Persians, a cavalry and levy civilization. Civilization bonuses. 1. Town centers support +5 population in feudal, castle, and imperial age. Sensible. 2. Town centers work faster for each farmer nearby, +2% each for 15% maximum. Very, very strong. Counterbalanced by that first bonus being definitely less powerful. Third bonus, foot soldiers cost -50% gold in castle age, -100% in imperial. Ooh! Now that's what we're talking about. That's some spice for you. And yes, his tech tree does accommodate for this. Fourth, can upgrade the battle elephant to the war elephant, a good way to keep an iconic unit as part of the build. 5, battering rams move faster, based in castle and imperial age, 50% total. His unique unit is the Aswaran, which is effectively a very heavy cavalry archer, also the war elephant upgrade. His unique technologies in castle age are Zentapep, which makes it so that elephants deal bonus damage against foot soldiers. And his Imperial Age unique technology is Spahbed, which makes it so that mounted units have bonus pierce armor. His team bonus is that trade units move a little bit faster. Maybe a little too small of a bonus, but we'll see. To give it some details on his unique unit, it is a very expensive but a very, very beefy cavalry archer. Honestly, I think that he does a great job of summarizing what it's good against, but it is largely speaking an anti-archer cavalry archer that has, excuse me, I got a hiccup. That has very good defenses compared to average, and it also has resistance to anti-cavalry archer damage. Wow, that's very, very nice. But that being said, it is very expensive, and you do also lack Bracer. He gives some detail about the unique technology origins, as well as reasoning for his civilization bonuses, which make perfect sense to me. I love when people focus on that. Something I wanted to focus on with this build is the foot soldier cost no gold and Imperial Age thing. This is inspired because of the cheap cannon fodder soldiers called the Paigan. I think that it's a very cool way of doing it, and as he said, he wanted to keep the spirit of Commanderan and translate it into a more direct bonus, because the trash bows are very, very fun. But they don't have hand cannoneers, so you can't get those as trash. And so pretty much this is just for your sword line, which is still capped at long swords and is not fully upgraded, and your crossbow line, which is again capped at crossbow and not fully upgraded. Really, really cool bonus. I love how daring it is. He gives a nice analysis of their economy, their archery range, pretty much all of the major parts of their design. He does focus on things like them lacking Bracer and the last infantry armor upgrade, as well as key technologies like Arbalester and two-handed swordsman. And so I think that he's done a fairly good job designing around that gold discount bonus, as well as he's made their siege workshop a good deal better than it is in the game right now, which does make sense to me. He does note, though, that their navy will be a good deal weaker than it is right now. Right now, the Persians have kind of a surprisingly good navy. And let's see, Monastery, he also specifies that he doesn't give, like, anything too crazy for them, but he did give them Sanctity, which they do lack right now. So a nice, good analysis of every one of their major buildings, a summary of their strengths and weaknesses, a nice playstyle analysis, and he ends it off with some uncertainties, which I also appreciate. And then he even has a tabled ideas section with a nice, beautiful table right here. Thank you for that. I always appreciate a good pun. I really like a lot of his tabled ideas. I think they're very, very clean, especially like the armored and siege elephants instead of rams. I might have gone that direction myself. And his unique unit, the Aswadan, switching between melee and ranged attacks also makes sense. And so in summary, he does a really good job of going over the potential flaws in his build, as well as ways to potentially correct them, and a number of the, frankly, really cool tabled ideas that he did not decide to go with for the build. So, to summarize some of my favorite parts about David GG's design, to begin, I thought it was very thorough. He had links, which I followed all of them to go check out like the different like Wikipedia pages and stuff that he linked. He had notes, and he even matched my presentation style, which I always appreciate. But obviously, the reason I have this build here is mostly because I love how daring it is. That Commander and everything bonus is so cool, and I think it's actually done rather tastefully. I don't know if it's perfect. I certainly think there could be elements of it that are just flat out broken. You're getting it for free after all, and that's always a scary thing. Maybe it could transmute the gold lost into their other main resource, so you're not just getting like 25 wood crossbows, but I still think it's a very good idea and a cool way of keeping the spirit of, in my opinion, the best part about the civilization while transmitting it into a new framework. I think that the historicity of his bonuses were very good, especially the farming one. Like the farming around town centers, making the town center work faster. I thought that was aces. I love his unique unit. It's a rare example of a unique unit design that's rather simple and straightforward, but I still really enjoy it. Like, it doesn't do anything too different from what's already in the game, but a burly cavalry archer that is resistant to anti-cavalry archer damage is a great idea, and I think that by itself could totally belong in the game as we know it now. And lastly, I think it does a great job of paying homage to the original Persians while still introducing a lot of really cool new ideas and remixing ideas together. And I think that it's in that respect a rather respectful take on a remake of the Persians, because there's a lot of dumb things about that civilization, and I think he manages to make those dumb things, like, they might be broken in some ways. I have no idea how it would actually play out in practice, but they're certainly less dumb to me, and they feel a lot more interesting and exciting. And with that, we come to the end of the finalists. You guys can begin voting on which of the finalists you would choose to win this contest. I'm going to have voting open for a week. So if you need time to think about it, as well as to give time to people who are not catching the stream and are watching in post, Take all the time necessary to do so. Cast your votes. Let's start getting the voting going. Take as much time as you need to consider. Again, it will be open for a week. Before we round off, though, we're also going to showcase all of the other builds, at least in short. I'm going to be doing this as superlatives, focusing on my favorite thing or the thing that was most notable about every submission given. To begin, Yvonne Streetum. Your superlative is you get the Thane of Theorycrafting Award. This absolute mad lad submits these unbelievably thorough, detailed, long builds. And he sent me like at least 20. It was so many. And there were a lot of really great ideas in there. Just ridiculously comprehensive, huge amount of detail. Honestly, a bit overwhelming for me to read. But to give focus on some of the things that I like most about his stuff, I would say that his rework of the Byzantines, his later French build, and his Castile build were my favorites of the ones that he sent. I have his gigantic document linked in the open access folder above. I would say my two favorite things he did is his Byzantine Greek fire unique technology was awesome. It's like so much better than the shitty, oh yeah, your bombard towers do splash damage, that they currently have. That thing just, when I saw it, it pissed me off because of how lame it was. And this is how you do a Greek fire unique technology right. Secondly, his wine cellars civilization bonus he gave to his French build, was genuinely one of the most creative and cool bonuses I've ever seen. To give a summary, it's the longer you go without spending food, you start to get a trickle of food. That's awesome. I love that idea, and I think it adds this dynamic layer to eco civilization, like to your eco side. And so, what can I say? Like, Yvonne, you are a champ. Salutations to you and all of your awesome builds. And I don't know what to say, man. You overwhelm me with how much you have going on here. Diego Ramirez, he gets the award for Best Piggyback. He went directly off of my own Dutch build and just kind of picked and chose which parts he changed. He even fucking screen capped me in the presentation, which was very funny, like kind of stuck in weird positions as per usual. And so I thought that like the way that he kind of selectively adapted what I had already done, not always very flattering, but was rather clean, and no one else did that in any of the builds that were submitted. Then, Simbel Mina, he did a build for the Tamils. He gets the award for the best unit. Now, he submitted an idea for a domesticated elephant unit, which was almost like a villager elephant. Very beefy, like obviously not fantastic in combat, but such a cool idea and such a no-brainer. Obviously, like elephants were used in labor all over India. I just absolutely adore this concept. And to be honest, Simbel Mina's build here was probably like one of the last cuts I made from the finals. It was so good. But even though he didn't quite make it, the domesticated elephant absolutely deserves a shout out. Fantastic idea. I might steal it in future with his permission because it's so good. Next, Christopher. He gave a build for the English, and he gets the award for the coolest castle unique unit. He had an idea for a yeoman unique unit that was a bow and pike hybrid that can also gather resources. Wow, that's sick and very in line with history. Transitioning from pikes to absorb cavalry charges to shooting when they are far, and also being able to gather outside of wartime. Very, very clean design. I also thought his build was really daring. Like, it took some really interesting risks, and I also thought it was brilliantly grounded in history while being very different from Rowan's build. It wasn't like the two of them were just kind of rehashing the same idea. So, excellent job there, Christopher. Other builds. Next one, Carlos Martinez Caballé. He gets the award for the most daring design. All right, Carlos, you know what you did. This absolute frickin' mad lad, first of all, gave a nomadic start with no town center but bonus villagers. He gave them trash Teutonic knights and no barracks. What the hell? That's just... Someone stop this maniac. I can't believe it. You also get the Best Memes Award because your doc was hilarious and very, very fun to read. Like, don't get me wrong, Carlos. Your ideas here were just absolutely whack and off the walls, but I admire it. I seriously admire it. And I think that there's a couple of these ideas that I'm like strongly consider for future builds. But you were even crazier than I would have been here. He did a build for the Hungarians, by the way. Next, Philip Babb with his Nipponese, a renaming of the Japanese. He has the best emission. People often talk about how, oh, Japanese don't have trebuchets, but they never talk about how to compensate the Japanese for missing one of the most essential units in the late game. Now, Philip actually focused his build very closely around how to actually remove trebuchets from the Japanese, and I actually think his compensation looks quite feasible. Japan had a fairly in-depth amount of siege warfare during the Middle Ages, and he does a good job of compensating missing the cornerstone siege unit with a couple of other good offerings in the Siege Workshop. Next, Origin of Symmetry. Oh, Georgians. He submitted 2 builds, Swedes and Georgians, or Georgians, as normal non-sick people spell them. And he gets the award for Best Presentation. We've gotten some really interesting presentations, some like really beautiful, well-done ones. Origin of Symmetries take the cake. You guys got to take a look just for the presentation alone. They're so clean and sleek, and just the Civ ensigns are beautiful. He had great attention to detail. It's well-organized documentation. I could read those for fun. They also were very conservative, but like quite creative designs. I would say they were overall distinctly on the underpowered side, but I thought that like he did a great job making sure they weren't overpowered, which is quite a frequent issue with Theorycrafts. Egyptians. And so, excellent job, Origin of Symmetry. Your builds were quite difficult cuts for me to make. Next, Bjarke Kier. He did a version of the Danes. He's getting the Prophet Award. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, he has some really good ideas in his build. I loved the inverse scaling mechanics he has, where certain units get worse over time and certain bonuses depreciate over time. I also think that his unique technologies were amazing. He has this version of Berserks. He makes it a unique technology, and it makes it such that infantry units are highly resistant to ranged arrow fire. And I thought it was brilliant. A great way to make infantry a lot more viable against their main bane. But the main reason that he gets the Prophet Award is that his build has like 5 references to a build that is coming out this week. A collab, not with him, by the way, that I've been working on with the collaborator for like 2 months. What do you know, Bjarke? How did you figure it out? Like, you'll see when that build drops. It's like quite uncanny how many like comparisons there are. Even the inverse scaling thing is an indirect reference. So Bjarke knows something. Keep an eye on that boy. And to give the last of the builds that were submitted, Divicos Power, you get the award for the hardest cut. You had a great history section. I loved the campaigns that you picked. I loved your unit reskins. That was a really underrated part of these designs is people showing what, like, if we actually had regional units or civilization-specific unit skins, what they would look like. So excellent job there. And I loved your unique religious magi and fire altar side. So I should note, since I forgot to record it here, I forgot to note it down here. He did a build of the Persians, specifically the Sassanids. And so he focused on earlier Persian history when they were actually Zoroastrian. I fought back and forth for so long about whether to go with his or David GG's. It was really difficult decision. I'm so sorry, Divicos. You were probably if I had had 6 finalists, you would be number 6. Really great build, man. Next, Dark Ranger 116, with his build of the Sicilians, gets the Parsimony Award. Now, what does that mean? Well, he actually makes very few changes to the Civ. He keeps quite closely to like how it currently plays, how it currently works, its current feel, and the changes he makes are very minimal. I'd say he made 5 or 6 notable changes, and all of them were focused on historicity, which I thought was brilliant. It's kind of an underrated side of theory crafting to make as few changes as possible to a civilization. Certainly not something that I'm very good at. And so Dark Ranger, nicely done. You well-earned Parsimony Award. And lastly, if not, I apologize, Saracen Warlord, by that I mean Warlord. I'm sorry, guys. With his build for the Shias. Now, this was obviously an Islamic power build, but he went in a dynastic direction rather than an ethnic direction. There would obviously be some comparisons to my Umayyads build, renamed to the Syrians, because they did follow some common ground there. He gets the Best Bonus Award. His build has some really cool ideas, but one of them was that your units can walk through your own walls. And that's just fucking cool. That's just a badass build. I absolutely adore it, man. Super, super cool bonus. It fit well with his design. And I also thought that the themes he overlaid in his in the beginning of his document really framed the build very well, and he had a beautiful ensign. So, Saracen Warlord, excellent job, man. You did a great work with this build. And frankly, all of you did fantastic work with this build, with all of the builds that you submitted. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to cast your votes. And I really hope this has been an enjoyable presentation for you, despite me sounding like death. Before we go on to chatting, just to kind of finally wrap it up, the channel is evolving very rapidly, and this, to me, kind of marks like a new high watermark for, I don't know, engagement, excitement, interest in what I'm doing. And I really do mean it when I say that this has been a wonderful experience doing this contest specifically, YouTube channel more broadly, but this especially was fun to see how much effort you guys put in and how much you taught me and how many cool ideas you had. Just very humbling. And because of that, I thank you profoundly from the bottom of my low-grade fever heart. Let's take a look at chat, shall we?